Hi, this is John Linneball, and this is how to study for the SAT and ACT, last minute prep for the SAT and ACT. There's an SAT coming up the day after tomorrow at the time that I'm recording this, and so I thought I would come out with this for you SAT takers or for those who are going to be taking the ACT in a couple weeks. What we're covering here: 1. What should I know for the math sections? 2. What should I know for the English, writing/grammar sections? 3. What should I know for the reading sections? 4. What should I know for the SAT and ACT essay sections? And remember, if you like this video, please don't forget to give this a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and click on the little bell in the top right corner for notifications. So, what to know for the math section, the ACT or the SAT? First, you want to know the instructions. Don't read them during the test. That just wastes your time. So the only difference between the instructions for the two SAT math sections is one lets you use a calculator and the other doesn't. You should know the formulas you'll be given. See this box here. So they give you the area of a circle, formula for the circumference of a circle, the area of a rectangle, the area of a triangle, the Pythagorean theorem, the properties of special right triangles, the volume of a box, a rectangular solid, the volume of a right circular cylinder, volume of a sphere, volume of a cone, volume of a rectangular bottomed pyramid. As far as the instructions are concerned, the only difference between the two SAT math sections, as I just said, is one lets you use a calculator, one doesn't, so I didn't bother to reproduce the number one that says you may use a calculator or you may not use a calculator. You'll be able to figure it out. There'll be an icon that shows either a calculator with a no symbol through it or just a picture of a calculator. All variables and expressions used represent real numbers unless otherwise indicated. That means unless they tell you it's an integer, assume that number can be a decimal, it can be a fraction, it can be an irrational number. They will also tell you if it is an imaginary number, where I, of course, is the square root of -1 or the imaginary unit. So figures provided in this test, this would be the SAT, are drawn to scale unless otherwise indicated. On the ACT, it's the opposite. You can't assume that they're drawn to scale, and it's unlikely that they will tell you they're drawn to scale. If they do, then of course you can believe them, however. But on the SAT, they are drawn to scale unless they say, note, figure not drawn to scale. All figures lie in a plane unless otherwise indicated. Pretty much that's not a real problem. If it's two-dimensional, it's in a plane. And unless otherwise indicated, the domain of a given function f is the set of all real numbers x for which f of x is a real number. So again, just assume everything you're plugging into a function is also a real number unless they tell you only use integers or you might use imaginary numbers. So use this box if you have to on the SAT, but there is no such box on the ACT. So memorize as much of this as you can. And they also tell you the number of degrees in an arc of a circle is 360, the number of radians is 2 pi, the sum of the degrees and the angles of a triangle is 180, and you should also know that a straight line is 180 degrees. Okay, so more math tips. You want to know the quadratic formula. That's negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a, where the quadratic equation is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So you should know this because they won't give this to you on the SAT or the ACT. And if you see radicals in the solution choices, you know you won't be able to factor and you must use the quadratic formula. I know if you are a real whiz at completing the square, you could use completing the square instead of the quadratic formula, but most students I've tutored don't like the completing the square method. In fact, one of my students who's a good student said his math class got a test where they had to solve a bunch of quadratic equations using completing the square, and the average score was a 30. So I'm going to assume that most of you are not that good at completing the square. If you are, yay, you're awesome. So, what to know for the math section, ACT or SAT? First, you want to draw a diagram for any geometry problem where the diagram is either not given, they literally didn't give you a drawing, or it says not drawn to scale. So you can draw in anything that's not shown. If the problem says something like line segment EF not shown is a diameter of the circle and a diagonal of the square, draw line segment EF. They didn't draw it because it's key to solving the problem, and including it would make the problem too easy. So anything they tell you isn't shown, draw the thing. It's your booklet, you can do whatever you want with it. More things to know for the math section. All diagrams are to scale unless they tell you figures not drawn to scale. You can trust them, and that's only true on the SAT, not the ACT, as I just said before. You can use the ruler method. You can literally use the edge of your answer sheet to measure line lengths. So just mark them off with your pencil. So if you know that one line is marked as having a length of 8 and you need to measure an unknown length, you can just mark off what 8 is and compare it and see what it is relative to 8. If it's shorter, it might be 6. If it's longer, it might be 10. You can also use educated guesses as a last resort. I'm not a huge fan of this ruler method. You might also get an exam proctor coming to look at you to figure out what you're doing, and you can tell them, you might be using the exam materials in a way that they didn't expect you to, but you're not cheating, so they should go away. If you do use this method, though, make sure you erase any stray marks on the edge of your answer sheet because you don't want the machine to score something as an answer that wasn't intended as an answer. Don't panic. There's an easy way to do almost all these problems. Back solving is one way where you literally just take each answer and put it into the formula and see which one gives you the right answer. And if the problems involve variables but no numbers, just plug in numbers that have the same relationship to each other as the variables. For example, if they tell you A equals BC, then make A equal to 6, B equal to 2, and C equal to 3. 2 times 3 is 6, and then just plug in those numbers into the answer choices to see which formula actually gives you the right answer. This also applies to word problems where no values are given but the relationship is stated. More math section tips. Okay, know how to add and subtract equations. You can see my video on simultaneous equations. Do not pick cannot be determined from the information given unless either 1, you know exactly what you would need to know to solve the problem and you can't get that information from what's given, or 2, you've eliminated all the other answer choices. Other than that, cannot be determined from the information given. It's almost always wrong. It's the math smart kid answer. It's the answer that dumb kids pick because that's what the math geeks would pick, so I'll be smart and pick that one too. Then they ask somebody who's actually good at math who'll say, no, you can solve that problem. Sorry. Anyway, memorize the information in the box at the beginning of the math section. Go back and use the box if you forget a formula or feel uncertain, but the more of it you memorize, the more time you'll save. Seconds do count on this test, so know your special right triangles that are in that box. The side length ratios for 30, 60, 90, and 45, 45, 90 right triangles, because they could give you a problem where they just show you the side length ratios, but they don't show you any angle measures because they expect you to figure out the angle measures from the side length ratios. You want to know these polynomial expansions, know the difference of squares. X plus y times x minus y is equal to x squared minus y squared, or a plus b times a minus b is a squared minus b squared. This is always on the SAT, always, always, always. They love it, and it's likely to be on the ACT. And notice that x plus yi times x minus yi is going to be x squared plus y squared, where I is the imaginary unit. And x plus y times x plus y is going to be x squared plus 2xy plus y squared. And x minus y times x minus y is x squared minus 2xy plus y squared. Please know these things. They're important to know, not only for the SAT and the ACT, but if you're going to take any math in college, you really should know this stuff. More math tips. Circles. You want to know the generic coordinate formula for a circle. X minus h squared plus y minus k squared is equal to r squared, where r is the radius and the center is at hk. That shouldn't be h point k, that should be h comma k. Sorry about that. It's an ordered pair. You'll get it. You will need this, and it won't be given to you. You will also need to know how to complete the square to solve a quadratic equation to solve many circle problems involving this formula. That is, they'll give you a formula that you need to get into the form x minus h plus y minus k squared equals r squared, and you'll have to know how to complete the square on one side, and then whatever you have to add to the hk side, you're going to have to also add to whatever value they have that will then be the radius squared. Google completing the square, or look into your math or SAT review book for information on how to do that. I will do a video on completing the square at some point. But I haven't done it yet, and it's not going to be done in time for the upcoming SAT in 2 days. So, know the coordinate distance formula, which is based on the Pythagorean theorem. Please know that as well. It's in the SAT formula box, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Again, you can just Google the coordinate distance formula. It's just d, and then it's going to have, x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. Those are both in parentheses under a gigantic radical sign. So you can Google the coordinate distance formula if you need to see that, or you can just look at my other videos, or you can look at my blog, etc. Geometry, you want to know the basics of geometry, especially rectangles, squares, cubes, circles, spheres, triangles, and transversals. I have a video on transversals. You should know that a tangent is perpendicular to a radius at the point of tangency on the circle. So here we have a tangent, here we have a radius. Notice that the radius goes exactly to the point of tangency where the line is tangent to the circle. That forms a right angle, a 90-degree angle. And know that the sum of the internal angles of an n-gon, that is a polygon with n sides, is n minus 2 times 180. So here we have a hexagon that's doing this interesting thing. You could go 6 minus 2 times 180, which is 4 times 180, and we can go to the calculator. Okay, 4 times 180, okay, that's 720. But anyway, 4 times 180, boom, 720, awesome. All right. So the sum of the two other angles of a triangle is the same as the supplementary, that is 180 minus the angle of the third. Why? Because both have to be 180 minus that angle. The other two angles have to add up to 180 minus that angle, and obviously the supplementary angle is by definition 180 minus that angle. All right. Math tips, probability. Know the basics of probability. Any probability is greater than or equal to 0 and less than or equal to 1. 0 means impossibility, 1 means certainty. The probability of something not happening is 1 minus the probability of that thing happening. Again, remember, if the probability is 0, that means it can never ever happen. 1 means it can't not happen. It just has to happen. So if you have something that either happens or it doesn't, there's no in between. The easy way to figure out the probability of it not happening, if you know the probability of it happening, is just subtract it from 1. So the probability of two independent events happening is the probability of the first multiplied by the probability of the second. If A has a probability of 1/2 and a completely unrelated event, what I mean, it's not controlled by event A in any way, event B has a probability of 1/3. The probability of both A and B happening is 1/2 times 1/3, which is 1/6. I'll come out with a better video on probability very soon, but not in time for the SAT. So, oh well. So area probability problems. You want to take the area of the target over the area of the entire figure. So here we have the square at right has a side length of 2. What is the probability of a dart that hits within the square not also being in the circle? So it'd have to be in here, and here, and here, and here, but not in here. Well, the probability would be the area of the square, and since we told you the side length is 2, we know it's 2 times 2, which is 4. And since the side is also going to be the diameter, why? Because it touches on the edge here, so that's the way across the circle, the length of the circle, length across the circle at the widest point is going to be exactly equal to the side length, so that's also 2, which means the radius is going to be half of 2, which is 1. So if the radius is 1, we know the area of the circle is pi times 1 squared, which is just pi, because 1 squared is 1. So the area of this region here is just going to be 2 times 2, which is 4 minus pi, so it's 4 minus pi. SAT is going to probably just give you the answers in terms of pi, so you don't have to estimate it on your calculator. But you can do it. It's not that hard. Okay, SAT and ACT tips, grammar, English writing. You should know how and when to use commas, dashes, semicolons. You can see my other videos for that. Know how to use complete sentences. There should always be a subject and a verb. An independent clause is something like, Jesus wept, and not something like before Jesus wept, because that before would change that to a dependent clause. No logical comparisons. I have 2 videos that I've just released on that. Please look at those. Know when to use he/him, she/her, them/they, who/whom. Basically, them and they do not work for singular pronouns. Even if you want something that's not gender specific, you have to say he or she or him or her, his or her, get it? And whom is the object, for whom the bell tolls. From whom did you receive that ticket? Who is at the door. So you use who where you could use he, and you use whom where you could use him. Know the subjunctive mood, be on time for my class. Notice when it's a command, it's not, you are on time. It's you be on time. I wish I were rather than I wish I was. So that's something that's counterfactual. It's something you wish were true that isn't true, or something, that isn't true, but hypothetically you're talking about it. What might be. All right. Math tips, probability, the counting principle. The counting principle says if there are X choices for one thing, such as ways to do a job, kinds of sandwiches you can have, and Y choices of another thing, the total number of combinations, not conversations, combinations, for both things is X times Y. This works for any number of things. So, for example, you could have a car company that sells 1 model pickup truck, 1 SUV, 1 sedan, and 1 sports car. Any of those vehicles can be purchased in red, blue, green, black, white, or yellow. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 different kinds of vehicles. And the vehicles come in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so 6 different colors. And any of these cars, or vehicles I should say, can be bought with a manual or automatic transmission. Okay, so that's 2. So how many different vehicle choices does the company offer? It's 4 models times 6 colors times 2 transmissions, which is going to be equal to 48 different vehicle choices. So the counting principle can be used in harder problems as well. You might see it in a problem such as this. In the United States and Canada, telephone numbers are 7 digits, a 3-digit exchange followed by 4 additional digits. The town of Phonyville wants to install a new phone system that follows the convention of pressing/dialing 1 before an area code for long distance and 0 for the operator. However, Phonyville doesn't follow the other real-life restrictions you might find in the US or Canada. For example, in many areas, a phone number can't start with 911 because that's the emergency number. 411 is information. 211, kind of more local information. 311, I forget, but it's an information service. 811, that's where you call if you want to know where you should dig and where you shouldn't dig so you don't hit a gas line or an electric line. Or 555, because a long time ago they decided to make that a non-used exchange, so for fake phone numbers for TV and things like that. So that means the first digit can only be 2 through 9, 8 digits, because you can't have 0 or 1 as the first digit, but the other can all be 10 digits, 0 through 9. So the total number would be 8 times 10 times 10 times 10 times 10 times 10 times 10, or 8 times 10 to the 6, which is 8 million. So there are a lot of phone numbers you can have. All right. SAT and ACT tips, reading. So you want to look for the general topic. Read the first and last sentence of each paragraph. So you want to go to the questions at the end, mark the questions ahead of command of evidence questions. So what I mean there is a command of evidence question is going to ask, what is the best evidence for the correct answer to the preceding question? So when I first saw those kinds of problems, I thought, oh, goody, you can get 2 questions wrong for the price of 1. But one thing that does happen when you see it is you can go look for these, what is the best evidence, Go to the question right before it that they're asking about, the preceding question. Put some kind of star, smiley face, / whatever there. So that way when you come across it, when you're reading the question a little bit later, you'll say, oh, right, this is one where I actually have to know where I got the evidence from. And then when you find the evidence in the reading passage, just mark it with your pencil in the margin so that way you know what line numbers it's at. And hopefully that is going to be aligned with some line numbers that are in the answer choices, so then you'll know the answer. It's not always true. They can have good evidence in more than one place in a reading passage, so maybe you got your evidence from one that they didn't use in the command of evidence question. That's the way the cookie crumbles. Check the line references so you aren't tricked. Always go back to check word meanings for vocabulary questions. What I mean is they love to use secondary meanings of words that we commonly use or archaic meanings. So if you actually read that part of the passage, you realize, oh, the author is using this word in a different way than what I normally use, but it's pretty obvious how he or she is using it. So I can guess this. If you just pick, oh, everybody knows it means this, then you're probably going to be wrong. If you say, oh, everybody knows a sheet is a piece of paper or something on your bed, and sheet there means a rope that's used for pulling up sails, you're going to get it wrong and you're going to be sad. Also, check the tone. When you read the little italicized blurb at the beginning, it might tell you something about who's writing it. If it says it's by the head of Greenpeace, the head of Greenpeace is obviously going to have a very different opinion than the head of Exxon. So if you're not sure if the author is being sarcastic or not, you might say, well, okay, the head of Greenpeace wouldn't seriously say, well, nothing is more important than oil drilling. What's wrong with killing a few endangered species if it, means that we have a secure energy future? He's probably being sarcastic. If it's the head of Exxon, well, the head of Exxon might actually say that. Probably not talking about killing endangered species, but he'd say, there are some acceptable losses, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so check the tone. You want to also just see, is it positive, is it negative? Who do you think would be most receptive to the argument the author is making, etc.? What do you think the author wants you to get across? It's always a good idea also to just go and underline the first and last sentence of each paragraph, so that way you're reading it, and that should generally tell you everything you need to know about each paragraph, because either the paragraph will start with the main point or it will build up to the main point at the end of the paragraph. All right, SAT essay tips. The essay is always going to deal with ethos, pathos, and logos. If you went to high school in the Bay Area, you probably know what those things are. If you did not, or you're like a minority of my students, you don't know what those things mean. Ethos just means authoritative opinion, facts. Pathos means appeals to emotion, rhetoric, good writing. Logos means logic. So the generic introduction you can use for literally any of the SAT essays is, then name the genre. Is it an essay? Is it an editorial? Is it an article? Is it a speech? They will tell you, so you won't have to guess. The author, name the author. Again, they name the author. You won't have to guess. Makes a convincing argument for topic listed after the article. They even tell you what the author's point is after the end of the article that you're going to have to read and analyze. So you don't even have to guess. Using ethos, and then you can define it as evidence and authoritative statements in the form of, list some examples. Pathos appeals to emotion in the form of sensory language, rhetorical questions. Some appeals to patriotism, family, morality. And logos, logic. How does the author argue from general to specific, which would be deductive logic, or specific to general, which would be inductive logic. So you want to leave space for the introduction, write body paragraphs first, then the introduction so they all match, and write the conclusion last. Some people like to just write from an outline. I'm more of a write-on-the-fly guy, so I like to just write the body paragraphs first, then write in the introduction so it looks like I planned it. If you're that kind of writer too, especially under pressure, I strongly suggest it, because otherwise you're going to think of some really great examples and things that you didn't think of when you wrote the introduction, and then you're going to have to try to squeeze it in with carets or something like that, little insert marks. And it's easier just to write the introduction and the conclusion after you've already written the body paragraphs and you know what you're writing about. In the SAT essay that you're going to write, you don't want to give your opinion. You are to analyze the writer's style. I have seen one student, I think it was an essay on school uniforms that was written, basically the ACLU wrote a very convincing editorial against school uniforms, and my student was a teenager who definitely did not want people telling her what to wear to school. So she's like, yeah, and saying, that's right, they're right here. And she got a very good grade for what she understanding it and reading it, but she didn't get a very good grade for analysis, because she just was kind of talking about why she agreed with it, not what methods they used to make their argument. However, you can sneak your opinion through the back door, and if you see an obvious flaw in the argument, and also your emotions, your opinion can be a good guide to what's wrong with an essay that does have a defect in it. You might say, well, wait a minute, they refer to just some really non-authoritative sources. So, for example, this argument would be better if the author cited to more authoritative sources than People magazine. Or the author seems to ignore an obvious counter-argument, namely, it would have been better, blah, blah, blah. And you can address it there. If there's some obvious counter-argument that the author doesn't even touch upon, great. You could say, well, yeah, this person says, oh, we need land-based nuclear missiles rather than ones that are on rail or on, submarines, where someone could say, well, we already have more nuclear weapons than we know what to do with. Why do we need any? That's a really huge counter-argument that you're ignoring. Something like that. If you want more SAT essay tips, you can read my blog at johnlinneball.com, and also I have several SAT essays. I have some that I wrote in real time, etc., that you can see on here. ACT essay tips, you want to leave space for an intro, write the body paragraphs first, then the intro so they all match, just like what I was talking about with the SAT essay. Write the conclusion last, because if you don't really have much of a conclusion at the end, or even if you omit the conclusion, it's not going to hurt you as much as if you have an introduction and body paragraphs that don't match or don't make sense or are really weak. You want to address the main premise. It's going to be something like the main topic about the availability of free online music, declining event attendance, things like that are in the sample essays given in the official ACT guides, the official ACT essays. You want to address each of the three perspectives and back your opinion with examples. Why do you agree or disagree with each perspective? I know they say you should address at least one. My suggestion is, if you can, do all three or do two of them. Back your opinion with examples. Why do you think they're right? Why do you think they're wrong? Presumably you have a reason, so cite to examples that back your reasoning. Then you want to state your perspective. So, do you agree with one of the three perspectives? Do you agree with all three partially? Is your perspective completely different? Just write it, and then obviously you need to back your perspective with examples. You want to use the Toastmasters formula. Basically, tell them what you're going to tell them in the introduction. Then tell them what you just told them. So list the main premise, briefly describe the three perspectives and your perspective in the introduction, then go into each one in the body paragraphs, and then finally write a conclusion at the end. Voila, you're done. Did you find this video useful? Great. Please like it and subscribe to this channel. Neither action costs you anything, and you'll be alerted about my new and always free videos. Why do I care? Well, it's simple. YouTube doesn't give me any ad revenue unless I have 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 hours. That's 240,000 minutes of view time in a year. So if you saw an ad on my channel, perhaps when you were watching this, please know that I didn't get anything from it. I got nothing. While many people are watching these, I don't have 4,000 hours of watch time. I still don't have anywhere near 1,000 subscribers, although I have about 315 at the time I'm recording this. So, yay, thanks to everybody who subscribed to my channel. And for the same reasons, you are not only welcome, but encouraged to share links to this video, put it in playlists, etc. I'm always happy to read and respond to constructive criticism or suggestions for new videos.
I'd appreciate your input.
I also reserve the right to delete comments from and block those who specialize in destructive criticism. Basically trolls, or people who post things that are off topic, just people who are spammers or nutty or whatever, and, because I want things to stay on topic. Alright, thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck on the SAT or the ACT.